I think that was your email.
Went into because I was in a meeting that nobody
was supposed to go to a meeting, and then I'm alone in the room, and they're in a different.
We do not have a quorum. We have Daniel, Ken, and myself, members of the commission. That's all I see at this point.
Gina's in there.
Yeah, Gina. So I was looking for the commission members. Oh, here's somebody else.
Sounds a call-in number now. That's how it, user 3 call-in number. So it doesn't even.
Yeah. Oh, user 4. So who joined us on the phone? Can you let us know?
Yes. Hi, Sandy. It's Alan Blazenstein.
Hey, Alan.
Hi, Sandy. Hello, this is Ethan Frankel here.
Hi, Ethan.
Hi.
Hello, Alan and Ethan.
Cindy, this is Gina Barano.
Hello.
I don't see anybody else on video. Can you see everybody on video?
No, I couldn't get my video to turn on. It said it didn't like it, which is weird because I was in another WebEx that.
I just don't have mine on.
Oh, wait, let me.
Are we supposed to be required to have video on for these as the commission members? This is Ken, or is that not?
Gina can tell us if that's what we should do.
It is being recorded.
Mr. Livingston, this is Gina Verano. I'm Deputy Counsel with the town. And it's our office's strong recommendation that all the commissioner members be on video. That's something that we have asked all commission members of all boards and commissions to do, to be on video.
All right.
Thank you.
My problem was I was in 2 meetings and it wouldn't let me have video in both meetings. I found the other one and closed it. So let's see. That sounds like, for some reason, I have to click participants and then it's on the side. Okay, but it doesn't, oh. There's Jill, good.
All right, guys.
My little bar is my list of participants.
Yeah, Dan Firestone's here.
Oh, great, Dan. Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just I can't get the list of participants over on the side just to see if we're.
Do you want someone else to read them off for you, or?
Yeah, does it look like we have 5 people, so we're at a quorum?
Colin, Daniel, Denise, Gina, Jill, you, myself, yes, that's 5.
Okay,
I
we're
think.
good. Okay, so let me call the meeting to order. And because we're doing things a little differently, Gina gave me some suggested things to say at the start. So this is Sandy Fry, Chair of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Commission. And I'd like to call our virtual meeting of the commission to order. Because we're trying not to have in-person meetings because of risk of transmission of COVID-19, this meeting is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order number 7B, which permits municipalities to conduct public meetings virtually. So what I'm going to try to do, we'll take a roll of the commission, and then I'll ask that everybody on the phones identify themselves, and we'll try to keep an eye out for when additional people join us. And as we go through our agenda, initially, the commission members will discuss items, but then we'll look to see if anyone who's on the phone would like to add anything, have any points to raise. And so we'll depend on you to unmute your microphone and let us know that you want to speak. And don't be hesitant if it seems like we're moving on to another topic and you didn't have an opportunity to speak. We'll ask, you need to state your name whenever you do speak. Let me see. And if you have a title, also give that. But I think most of us don't have titles. If we have any voice votes, we'll have to take the votes by roll. I'm not really expecting we're going to have any votes, but we might. So I will now call the roll. Daniel Johnson, are you here?
Daniel Johnson's here. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Colin Gillespie.
Yes, I am here.
Great. Denise Gutierrez.
Yep, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Denise. Daniel Firestone.
Here.
Ken Livingston.
Here.
Paul Hogan. Morowski.
Here.
Ryan Nebrega. And Sandy Fry, I am here. So we have 7 people, well over a quorum, so we may conduct business. The first item on our agenda is approval of the previous meeting's minutes.
Sandy, we're going to have
Hello.
anyone
Sandy.
on to
Yes.
introduce themselves.
What was that, Jill?
Hello, Sandy. This is Jim O'Donnell. I just wanted to let you know that my daughter Claire is now on the call.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. I'll turn it over to her for whenever she's called upon.
Okay. Yeah, let me see. I think there are 5 people on the phone. I have Alan Blazenstein, Ethan Frankel, Claire O'Donnell. Who else do we have on the phone at this point?
Ed Paulak here.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Anybody else? Okay. Well, as we go along, and it's helpful if you mute your phone or your computer until you want to speak, and that'll help keep our sound quality better. Okay. Looks like we have several more people who called in, but maybe through the course of the meeting, they'll identify themselves. Okay, so first order of business, approval of the previous meeting's minutes. That was the first item behind the agenda in the packet that was sent out to you. Did anybody have any comments, any corrections, concerns?
No, Sandy, this is Daniel.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the meeting's minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Jill. Now we will have to take a,
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of the group, each one of the individuals who is speaking needs to identify themselves first. That goes to the commission members, just so that people who are listening on the phone know who's speaking, because they don't know your individual voices. So for example, if you're going to second a motion, you'll identify yourself and say, I second the motion. And then also, Madam Chair, when it comes time to take the vote, you'll have to do it by roll call instead of voice vote, so that you know the commissioners are approving the minutes and not perhaps other participants who are on the phone. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So motion made by Daniel Johnson, seconded by Jill Morowski. Since there were no comments on the minutes, I think we can take the vote now. So say yay or, well, say yes or no. That'll be easier to hear. Daniel Johnson?
Daniel Johnson says yes.
Colin Gillespie?
Colin Gillespie says yes.
Okay. Denise Gutierrez?
Denise Gutierrez says yes.
Okay. Daniel Firestone?
Daniel Firestone abstains. I wasn't there.
Okay. Ken Livingston?
And Livingston, yes.
Jill Morowski?
Jill Morowski, yes.
Sandra Fry votes yes also. So it passes with 5 votes, 1 abstention. Wait, 6 votes, 1 abstention. There's 7 of us here. Okay. Next item on our agenda is updates on roadway projects. And this is where usually I will fill you in on what Dwayne and I discussed in a phone conversation week prior, but since we have Dwayne here in the meeting, thank you, Dwayne. Dwayne Martin, our city engineer, or town engineer, can give us an update. Does that work for you, Dwayne? Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
So, as many of you may know, it's Dwayne Martin, town engineer. We just finished the paving of many streets as part of our first round of repaving, and we're actively working on reconstructions. But as it relates to bicycle facilities, I'll list them off, and feel free to stop me if anybody has any questions. For all of the roads in our first round and our second round, with the exception of one, I'll list off. The one exception, it was a late addition, and we did share some information with Sandy regarding bicycle facilities for that one, but we're trying to quickly get caught up. The projects that we worked on so far in the first round were North Main Street, from Albany Ave down to Pioneer Drive. And that section of North Main is proposed to get Sharrows. We repaved actually 2 sections of Fern Street. We took advantage of school being out, and we ended up repaving 2 sections of Fern Street at once. So the length of Fern from Tropic Drive to Prospect Avenue. And for the most part, we have bike lanes on both sides of that stretch of Fern Street. The Morley School area was discussed. There were letters that went back and forth, and we can get into that if you'd like.
Why don't you go through all the projects first, Dwayne, and then we can go back and discuss. I think that might work better.
Sure. And then another one was Webster Hill Boulevard. There was a section from South Main Street down to Crestwood that was recently repaved. And some of these, the pavement marking contractor has been in town to lay them out. So you're starting to see what it would look like with the bike lanes. So for Fern Street and Webster Hill Boulevard, those will have bicycle lanes. For Fern Street, we ended up proposing to eliminate on-street parking except for near the school, as I mentioned. And for Webster Hill Boulevard, it was so wide, we were able to have lanes on both sides and still accommodate parking on one side. I did hear from a number of residents, not a lot, but a few, when the letters went out with regards to the loss of parking. That always seems to be a challenge. It was more challenging, I think, this time because there's more people home from school. Like one homeowner called and said she had college students living at home, and she relied on the parking. So for round 2, we have 2 sections of Boulevard planned. We have a section of Boulevard that is from Whiting Lane to Prospect Avenue. And the proposed layout for bicycle facilities is the same as the one that was done just to the west of it. So there'll be a bike lane in the eastbound direction and a shared approach in the westbound direction. And that plan was shared with you guys. Comment. And then the one I mentioned before, the recent add-on was is planned for our second round. It's a section of Boulevard from Farmington Ave to Mountain Road. So it's the complete opposite side of Boulevard. And so for that section of Boulevard, we are planning on having buffered bike lane. And similar to Webster Hill Boulevard, that section of Boulevard is pretty wide. And so we're able to accommodate on-street parking on one side of the street. I think we're proposing the south side because there's more houses on that section of Boulevard on the south side, and still be able to accommodate the buffered bike lanes. So I shared with Sandy a cross-section showing the existing pavement marking layout and the proposed, showing the buffered bike lanes and the parking on the south side. We're working still on the pavement marking and signing plan, and as soon as that's done, I'll forward that to you guys for comment. The question is always what to do at the intersections. When we get to the busy intersections, they widen out, have turning lanes. What do we do in those areas? So that's something that we need to figure out. So I mentioned round 1 was just completed. So the pavement marking should be going down on those streets soon. Round 2, the milling is planned to start the week of June 22nd. It's probably about 2 weeks worth of milling and probably 3 to 4 weeks worth of paving. It's a very big round. So the pavement markings on Boulevard may not actually happen until like the beginning of August would be an estimate. The only one that beyond that was 2 actually that I wrote down beyond that. One is Hyde Road, which is also planned for our second round, and that's planned to get Sharrows. And then our third round is still kind of up in the air from a funding standpoint, but I did want to mention that Park Road from Troutbrook Drive to Quaker Lane South is planned. We have the funding for that in our third round. I believe we are able to accommodate on-street bike lanes on that section of Park Road.
Dwayne, I think you shared plans of that with us already. Is that possible?
Yeah, I believe we did.
Okay.
So that's it for the paving program. For this year.
It might be good now to open up for some discussion. We had, just to remind everybody, we had shared a letter with we had sent a letter to the town saying we felt that the bike lanes should not be halted at Morley School, that they have other streets around the school they can use for pickup and drop off. And we heard back from the town via a letter from Dwayne, and I shared that with everybody, saying that no, that was not going to be possible, that frontage needed to be used for drop off. And one of the things we asked Dwayne was that signage go up that say bike lane ends, bike lane starts again. And you'll be able to do that, won't you, Dwayne?
Yeah, we talked about it. The signing and marking plan that I sent for review and comment as you are heading eastbound towards Morley School, so you're right around Ardmore Road, that intersection. That plan showed a sign that says bikes in lane, and it has a symbol of a bicyclist and a symbol of a motorist or car. Those signs Public Works has on hand. So the bikes may use full lane, I believe is the wording of the sign. That was what was requested. So that sign is a special order sign. And so when we have another order for signs through Public Works, we're going to add that to the list. But we're not exactly sure when we're going to get it. It would be sometime this year, but I don't know exactly when. So I don't want to hold up everything. So the plan is we'll put the sign up that we have on the signing marking plan up now. And when the new sign arrives, we'll switch it out. So it'll eventually say bikes may use full lane. And then as you ride past Breton Road, the bike lane starts back up again. So we're going to put a bike lane sign at that spot to reintroduce the bike lane.
Do any commission members have any comments or thoughts that they want to add to this discussion now?
This is Joe Morosky. I have a question about the signs and then a comment. Thank you for putting up this sign. In many places where bike lanes are interrupted, the motorists, bike may use lane, that instructs the motorist, but it doesn't instruct the cyclist that the lane is ending. So there are other kinds of signs that can say bike lane interrupted and bike lane resumes. Because saying bike may use lane does not tell the cyclist that they're going to lose their lane. You know, may use blue lane is not instruction enough to tell the cyclist they must do it, so they can't prepare. But I'm just pointing that out. There are signage that can do that. Excuse me. But my concern, Dwayne, I think you're doing marvelous work, but I didn't send you, but I attempted to. The data on door injuries with cyclists. It's the third most common pedestrian cyclist car accident, and it has a very high mortality rate, believe it or not. So my concern was because it is drop up and pick up and also parking, there's going to be people getting in and out of cars all the time. So one of the things I hope we'll think about, the vice principal and the principal didn't know about bike safety. They don't know about accident rates of interrupting a lane or having people go by parked cars. Is that when we make these decisions, we take all the shareholders, the stakeholders, and put them together. We all talk about it so we can share our knowledge. I don't believe Morley School needs that space. They have unbelievable amount of blocks around them, but they believe they do. So it's a conversation, I think, when we go forward to try to aim for uninterrupted lanes, and we can't have them where someone opposes that. We should get the stakeholders together. It was not an informed decision. It was a decision about someone who feels they need parking. To us, it doesn't seem like they need parking. There's lots of parking. So I'm just hoping going forward, when there is occasions where we have to interrupt a bike lane, which are marvelous things to have in our town, that we have a conversation with all the stakeholders, the commission, whatever the organization is that claims they can't tolerate bike lanes, so that we can come to a better understanding of their importance or the importance of interrupting them.
Was there anybody else who wanted to address this?
Sure, Sandy, this is Ken Livingston. I would like to echo what Jill had said, and I know there's the give and take all around, and maybe there was some missed opportunities. So I'd love to know on our part where we maybe have some opportunities to do some further education or community outreach engagement to have this discussion be had, because in truth, we're making a decision to support, you know, you may say the peak Christmas parking rush. It's about, if you think of it, it's 10 hours a week where maybe the bike lanes or the parking is needed. You know, an hour in the morning, 5 days a week, and an hour pickup. Occasionally there is a school activity event, but beyond that, you know, I live nearby. There's not, the parking's not being used most of the time during school days, and it's not being used on weekends. So, we're making a decision to interrupt a continuous bicycle infrastructure facility for about 10 hours a week of potential use, and echoing Jill's comments of parking potentially being available in other locations, and this being primarily a walking neighborhood school. I wonder if there was a missed opportunity to really, for maybe our group to push forth and get ahead of the process. And I know, Dwayne, you are doing sort of, what you heard and the general guidance, but, I think these are the things, maybe it's our fault not to get ahead of the game even further and do some outreach, or I'm not sure where we understand our role to do that, to sort of plead our case. I just think we have a great opportunity to put these long continuous bike lanes, and it just says, okay, but where there's an issue, it's not a priority. And so I'm not sure where we go, but I'd love us to be even further ahead of the game going forward.
If I can, Sandy, and I don't have a very good network connection, so hopefully you guys can hear me better than I can hear you guys. When we started picking roads in the wintertime, Sandy and I talk frequently, and I let her know as soon as possible. My suggestion would be to look at our pavement condition map, which is on our engineering webpage. Pavement condition map has 5 different categories. And so when I'm making the joyous selection of streets for repaving and wishing it could be much longer, my focus is on the extremely poor rated roadways, the worst case roadways. Those are the ones I pick first, and then we meet with utility companies, and the list, gets changed from there. So my suggestion would be to look at those, look at the extremely poor streets, and perhaps the poor ones as well, but I would focus on the extremely poor, in comparison to the bicycle facility map, where it shows bike lanes or some other treatment, and those are the ones that get ahead of the game. Admittedly, sometimes these things come together, like the other section of that got added on. That I wasn't planning on repaving that. It came together pretty quickly. And admittedly, sometimes we're not even producing and signing and marking plans until 4 weeks before we start milling. It's just sometimes these things come together at the last minute, unfortunately. But Sandy's request early on, when I told her about it, was let's meet with the school, with the town. And unfortunately, in the coronavirus environment, it was just towards the beginning of that. I'm not even sure we were doing virtual meetings at that point. It was pretty early on. And so to actually get together to meet was a challenge. You still can. And I did interact with Assistant Superintendent Andy Morrow, as well as the school principal. And they weren't, ignoring the bicycle concern for safety. But I think at the same time, they're recognizing the parent concern and the young kids going to and from the school. They do park on other streets. They're not focused just on. I think that's the preference, is to park there just because they're on the school side. They're not allowed to park on Breton for the most part because of the school buses, and then across the street, if you park there with the school buses, it's too tight to get by. It's a safety issue. There was a lot of information in our traffic file regarding that. I think they park on Ardmore, although it's not really preferred. I know they park on Cumberland and then they walk across. We're actually adding a stamped asphalt crosswalk and a flashing sign to help with that crossing maneuver. So my suggestion would be, if you want to look ahead, look at our pavement condition map in comparison to the bicycle facility plan and target some of those areas of interest. This particular section on the bicycle facility plan did not show a bike lane, so it would have been obvious at that point, hey, why is that? And then the discussion there. It's not a lost opportunity either. I think in one of the correspondence it said, we'll look to the future to plan this, maybe to get it to be a bike lane at some point. So those conversations can still happen. Who knows what's going to happen with the school as far as the transportation goes. Maybe it will change over time.
No, and I think it's more for us as this as a commission, you did, and I understand that. I think, this is where we probably need to even step up our game more and say, hey, let's reach out. Let's really be a bit proactive and from the grassroots up, because I wonder if talking to the PTOs with some education and some discussion, maybe they would even be pushing the principal to have some different perspective. So it's good to hear, there may be an opportunity going forward to potentially change that pattern if we get some overall support. It's not a long area that would need to be sort of restriped if need be. So maybe it's something as a commission we should consider thinking about as we go forward.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to think about outreach to the school system, because we don't really have a good connect in the way that we connect with Dwayne regularly. So I think that's something we should try to figure out. Dwayne, do you want to continue then with your report?
Yeah, I can keep going. So there's some good news. I will say Quickly, that we did submit an application for Sedgwick Road, and we thank the Pedestrian Bicycle Commission for an endorsement on that project. So that went to CROG, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed. So that's a pavement rehabilitation, a repaving project on Sedgwick from Wardwell Road to South Main Street. And the idea would be to introduce bike lanes on that stretch. We would also enhance the main crosswalk near the school, and then also modify the traffic signal at South Main at Park and Sedgwick to accommodate accessible pedestrian signal equipment. There's some good improvements there near some schools. North Main Street Bridge, I'll jump into that. So the project's progressing pretty well. They're in their second of 4 stages, and so far so good. They sent us an updated schedule that's still projected to go into next summer. I think for the most part, the end of June. So just about 1 year from now, they hope to be done. I know there's some interest in not repainting the road as part of that bridge project with 4 lanes. And so that kind of rolls into the road diet and where we are with that. So the North Main Street road diet, we did receive 3 proposals from consultants. We rated them and we made a selection. And we did have a preliminary meeting with the consultant that we're looking to go forward with, which is VHB. And we discussed the scope. And they had a really good proposal. They had a lot of excellent ideas in there. They talked about how to handle the project with the coronavirus environment and moving forward. One of the things that was discussed, I know that you guys were interested in, is the length of the trial. How long should the trial be out there? And they recommended 6 months, is what they said. So that's the plan. As far as when to start the trial, we're still looking at that, but I think it's going to be, like we discussed, as soon as possible after the bridge project is complete. Question is, when exactly will the bridge project be complete? North Main Street from Pioneer Drive down to certainly south of Fern Street, pick a street near the center. It's in really rough shape. In fact, I think if you look at the map, it's for the most part extremely poor. And that concerns me to go through another winter. So I think what we're going to probably end up doing is trying to do a thin mill and pave at the tail end of the bridge project. And hopefully we have the trial design completed so that we can do just a thin mill and pave and restripe it and have the road diet implemented at that point and start the trial. And so it's, rather than putting pavement markings down for the trial on bad pavement, I would rather do it that way. So that's one of the things that we discussed with them. They're modifying their scope. We've given them what we have for traffic signal plans. We're giving them what we have for traffic counts. And they are going to look at their proposal, our scope of services, and modify it accordingly. They're supposed to get back a modified scope within a couple weeks. Assuming that there are no issues, we would then go forward with a contract signing. And then we would follow that up with a kickoff meeting. There's a lot of things that they can do while the bridge is under construction, and they're on board with all of that. A lot of acquisition of data. They can start the analysis. They develop concept plans, modify the traffic signals, basically get ready for the trial. But there's also a lot of outreach. And so there's going to be surveys, web page, and some other things set up to get feedback from stakeholders like the PBC. I don't have an exact schedule yet from them, but that'll be part of the conversation early on. If there are no questions on that, I'll go to the next one. Okay. Boulevard at 4 Mile in Newport. I know there was some interest in that. We were testing the semi-divert at Boulevard and 4 Mile. The plan moving forward is we're going to split it up. So the outcome of what we did so far to test the semi-diverters was that there were no crashes that occurred at Boulevard and 4 Mile. So with respect to that intersection, that was a success. However, there were 2 crashes that occurred at Boulevard and Newport. So if you look at it, it was over a 5-month period. But if you do the math, that's actually an increase in crashes at Boulevard and Newport. So that was not a favorable result. There was definitely a diversion of traffic from 4 Mile to Newport. It was about 400 cars a day that instead of using 4 Mile, we're using Newport. So that was another undesirable impact to the Newport residents and neighborhood. So the plan is to split it up. So the idea is, if if you're on 4 Mile, you would not be able to go northbound towards Farmington Ave and go straight across Boulevard. You'll still have to go left or right. If you're going in the reverse direction on 4 Mile, so you're leaving from the center from Farmington Ave and you're heading towards Boulevard, you will be able to continue straight across Boulevard and continue southbound on 4 Mile to get to Sedgwick. The reverse will happen at Newport. So you'll be able to go from Sedgwick up Newport, cross Boulevard, and continue on towards Farmington Ave, but you won't be able to do the reverse. So if you're on Farmington and you turn on to Newport and you're heading towards Boulevard, once you get there, you'll have to turn left or right. So they'll work in tandem. The thought is the traffic volumes will kind of go back, balance each other out, and you'll get a safety benefit at both intersections. And so the plan is we're gonna have Public Works split up the semi-diverters. We'll set it up, we'll monitor it for about 2 to 3 months. Hopefully we get the results that we're looking for, and then we'll do a design and build from there. The hope ideally is that we get favorable results and we're actually building the semi-diverter at least at Boulevard and 4 Mile, because I am interested in repaving 4 Mile this fall. So we'll see how that goes. A couple other things real quick. Expanded outdoor dining in the center. You guys probably have heard about that. So some changes in particular to LaSalle Road and Farmington Ave. Definitely changed the environment. We're also trying out the back and angle parking on LaSalle Road. So far, so good. I think there's a little bit of a learning curve, but the report that I heard was it's going pretty well, and it's definitely getting much more active with the expansion of the outdoor dining and retail. So definitely would check that out. And then the last thing with Gina is the trail update. So Gina has been working tirelessly on this maintenance agreement. You recall, we're trying to build 2 long sections of the Trout Brook Trail on state land, partially on state. So the sections are from Farmington Ave all the way up to Duffy. There's a large stretch of those 2 sections that are actually on state property. And in order to get them to allow us to do that, we need to come up with a maintenance agreement and easement to be able to have access and build and maintain the trails after that. And so Gina was working, I don't know how long, back and forth with the DEP on this. And so most recently, she was able to get it approved by the town council so that the town manager can sign it. We're still ironing out a couple of the details on the submission to the DEP, but in principle, we have a tentative agreement that the town manager will be able to sign, and then we'll send things back to the state to get the Attorney General's office to review and sign it. I don't know, Gene, if we have any idea how long their end process will take. Hopefully not too long.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would suspect months. It has a couple levels of review to go to. It's got the State Property Review Board, OPM, and the AG's office. So 3 levels of sign off when real estate of the state is involved.
So Dwayne, do you have to, it has to be all approved before anything can move forward, right?
Yeah, it's Dwayne Martin, town engineer again. Yeah, technically, we're not allowed to start any of the construction on their property without the agreement signed and returned, and I think filed on the land records to make it official. One of the phases is through CROG. It's a grant through CROG, so that one also has to be reviewed by the DOT before we'll get the authorization to go into a construction phase, the commitment to fund. The other one is ironically funded by DEEP, Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So once we get the sign off on the easement and maintenance agreement, we should be able to go forward with that bidding process. That one is phase 5, so Farmington to Fern. It's actually the one I want to build first anyway, because it's closer to the center and it progresses from south to north. So it builds on the trail that we already have in the center area. So hopefully it won't take too long to get the other one to a construction phase. And then we're still working on phase 3. The design is being handled in-house by another one of my engineers, Julie Vieira. And so she went through a preliminary design, but got pulled in other directions. But she's getting close to starting back up on that. And hopefully we can finish the design this year and be in construction in that one next year. Keeping my fingers crossed that phase 3 5, and 6 will all be completed by the end of next construction season.
All right, this is Sandy Fry, Chairwoman again. Thank you, Dwayne.
Sandy, this is Ken. I do have a question, another question for Dwayne.
Okay.
And this slightly echoes my question about us for engagement for Morley schools, but for the town center and all of those changes, I understand as of now we're thinking of them, or the town's thinking of them be through October. Is there anything us as a commission or others could be doing to further analyze this, and not that we would hopefully be in a pandemic COVID situation, next spring, but to document potentially the success and value of this and make it be anyway, at least have some consideration that this could be a more permanent seasonal type of setting. And I'm not sure I even think that will make sense or not make sense, but is there any thought that at least we should be considering it, or any way we could help to evaluate that as a potential, I guess?
It's interesting. I want to say yes, because I think some of the aspects of it could be kept or could come back seasonally. I think one of the challenges is the loss of parking.
Right.
And so it's, as most things that occur, there's people that love it and people that don't. And so it did create some challenges with the retailers and the loss of parking. So as people are able to get out and sort of get back to normal, if you will, I don't know where the parking demand or when the parking demand is going to come back. I think that probably would be the biggest challenge, is expanding it. But I know there was a lot of positive interest in the back and angle parking. This was an opportunity on LaSalle to try that out. And I know the Pedestrian Bicycle Commission has brought this up before for safety reasons. The Public Works Director was interested in trying it. We got a little bit of support from the city of New Britain. If you've been out on LaSalle, you'll notice that the back and angle instructional sign, if you will, is pretty much the same as theirs. The police chief was interested in it from a safety standpoint. So there was a few different directors that saw the value in trying it. So we're definitely looking at that. The expanded outdoor dining into the parking area, I think, is going to be a challenge. But there may be areas. I know Todd Dumais, the town planner, has expressed interest in doing, and I'm forgetting the fancy term, the planner's term for it, but essentially you do these pocket expansions into the right of way for periods of time to serve various needs.
Yeah, I didn't know if there's, you look at it and ask everyone, okay, if we have this, and this, it could be unbelievable success, and we would think of considering it permanent. I'm not sure, it warrants it or not, but I wonder if there's a checklist and evaluation criteria that if everything got achieved metrics, people would say, yeah, this was a success, because, we do know there is a variety of parking that is available within town, some of it's wayfinding, and who knows, it could be a complete failure and you could be changing this thing in 3 weeks because it's a colossal mistake. Hopefully not, but maybe if it's a colossal success, it'd be great to think of some metrics that would then say, this is no brainer. Let's plan to do this again and do it slightly better or differently. But I don't know. I think us as a commission would be very happy to see how we could support either with, in some way. I'm putting the whole commission out there, but I think we're all excited about it. So.
Sure. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Dwayne. Now we're moving on to proposed bike parking locations. And I put this under old business because at our last meeting, Jill had reported that they had a link to a map that showed the locations where more parking was needed. And we sent that out to the commission, and we sent it out more broadly to see if anyone would say, I disagree, there's more that should be provided. But what that was showing was 2 locations that need bike parking: Park Road between Quaker and Prospect, and New Britain Avenue between Mayflower and Quaker. So it may be, I think at this time we probably should, I see that Dwayne's writing this down as I speak, I hope. He's jotting things down. But I think the commission should prepare a letter and send to the town, just to say, we did a survey of all the locations, we looked at what the needs were, we reached out to other bicyclists, and here's what we think is what's needed, and please consult with us if you need further information. What does everyone think about that? And maybe Jill, you would jump in first because it was your committee.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? This is Jill. I lost, I had to close my computer and find you guys again. I just got on, so I've missed everything since Dwayne talking about North Main. What is?
Okay, let me. What I just said, Jill, was that we had sent the map out of the proposed bike parking locations, and we got no feedback. So I think that's tacit approval of the work that your subcommittee did. So I was proposing that we send a letter to the town saying these two locations on Park Road and New Britain Avenue are where we saw a need. And we hope the town would work to place more bike parking there and that we could be a resource to them. So if you're agreeable, Jill, maybe you would make a motion, since it came out of your committee, that we send a letter like that to the town.
Okay, this is Jill Morosky talking again. Alan, are you on?
I am.
But Alan really did the most of the work. So Alan, would you like to, oh, you can't make a motion, but are you happy with the proposal that we request those 4 parking facilities?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the thing I was going to add to it, and this is clearly something I did that quite a number of months ago, is that my wife has.
Alan, can you just move closer to the phone, or?
Okay, sorry, is that better? Or?
Slightly. Maybe just talk very loud.
Okay. Yeah, so the only thing I would add to it maybe is that the circumstances changing, like with parking places being lost in the center and all that perhaps we should just fill in a few.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is Deputy Corporation Counsel Gina Verano. You're going to have to ask the speaker to identify himself. And if we really can't hear him, he can either hang up and try dialing it again, but we really can't proceed with that inaudible, because remember that this is being recorded.
Okay.
Okay.
I am going, yeah, this is better. And I would ask everybody who's not speaking to mute their phone.
Yeah. Hi, sorry. I was mostly on there for listening purposes, so I wasn't really as ready to speak. This is Alan Blazenstein, and I guess I had worked with Jill in the subcommittee and developed that map of the parking. And the only thing I was going to add is that, yes, I think that the parking priorities that we had discussed about being like Park Road and New Britain Avenue in the commercial district there were very good priorities, because I think those areas are not well served at all. And the only thing I would add to it is maybe that, you know, at the time I thought that parking was pretty good in West Hartford Center for bikes, but with the fact that I think more people are biking now and there's fewer car spaces, that maybe we could look into filling in some of the gaps in the centers. For example, like there's only one post behind in that area behind CVS in the Brace Road parking lot. So literally you can show up there sometimes and the bike and the parking doesn't exist. But, you know, I would say overall, yes, I do agree with that approach.
All right. So, Jill, perhaps you would make a motion and you and Alan would draft the letter that then the commission can review. You're muted. You're muted, Jill.
Am I here? Oh, now I can't hear.
I can hear you, Jill.
This is Jill Morosky, and I propose that the commission writes a letter to the town requesting the 4 parking facilities we just discussed. I can't name them right now. And also to add, given what Alan has suggested, to say that we have noticed, we are aware that there may be greater parking, bike parking needs in the center with with the increased use of bicycles in the center, but we don't have to add that, but I think it's worthwhile so they don't hear us coming back in 6 months and asking for more parking.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Dan
Colin,
Firestone, I second.
I think Colin was the first to second, so we'll record that as Colin seconding. Any discussion on the motion?
No discussion. This is Daniel Johnson. Sorry. No discussion. If the commission can review the draft before sending to the town for approval by the commission members.
Yes, that is what we'll do. Okay, so I'll call for a vote. So we will do this by roll call. Daniel Johnson,
Daniel Johnson says yes.
Colin Gillespie,
Colin Gillespie says yes.
Denise Gutierrez,
Denise Gutierrez says yes.
Daniel Firestone,
Dan Firestone says yes.
Ken Livingston,
Ken Livingston says yes.
Jill Morowski, Jill Morowski. I think she must have had.
Morowski says yes.
Excellent. And Sandy Fry says yes. All right. Next item on the agenda is update on bike share. And I have had some discussions with Krog, and what I know is that the successful bike share bidder, Zagster, was acquired by a company called Super Pedestrian. And it's not clear what that means for our regional bike share program yet, but I think Krog is working through that, figuring out what happens. Does the new company take over the contract that they have in place? So that's kind of on hold. And I think really countrywide, bike share has been very challenged by the pandemic. And I think that's why there was this acquisition. And there's just been a settling out in the bike share industry overall. So we don't know exactly where that will go. So that's bike share. Fourth grade education program. I don't think we have any progress to report. I will mute myself to see if anybody has any progress to report.
Sandy, this is Scott Franklin. Can you hear me? Sandy?
Go ahead, Scott.
The last email we had from Alyssa Norwood was on March 10th, and which was right before the whole coronavirus thing came upon us, and there's been nothing since then. So there really is nothing to report.
Thank you for that, Scott. I kind of lost track, so that's helpful.
Sure.
All right, so that's everything under old business. Now moving to new business. The first item was Mountain Road and Farmington Avenue. Alan had pointed out to the town issues with right turn on red, with vehicles turning without looking for pedestrians at all. When I last talked to Dwayne, you had said that you guys would maybe be able to get a camera out there to really see what's happening at the intersection. So just looking for an update if you have anything to share on that.
Yeah, Dwayne Martin, town engineer again. We haven't had an opportunity to do that yet, but just for the general benefit of the group, we did purchase a camera, which we have to get approval before we put it out at any locations from the town manager. But the camera is great. The video quality is good. The benefit of it is, for this example, Farmington and Mountain, the concern about pedestrian safety and the no turn on red. I could send a staff person out there for pick a duration of time, pick a time of day, and they may or may not get the full understanding of what's going on. But we can actually put a camera out there, and I think it has a day and a half, 2 days worth of battery life, and it can even view pretty well at night. And so we just put it out, we bring it back in. And for instances like this, where you may not have an issue constantly, you know, it might pop up every now and again, you can fast forward. And so it's much better use of staff time with this technology. And we've used it in a number of locations. We're a little challenged right now because a lot of my staff is working from home, but we will get back out there with the camera to investigate this further.
Sandy, this is Alan Blazenstein. Yeah, hi. Hello? Can you hear me? I just
Yes,
want to
go
add one
ahead.
thing to what was said. Yeah, I just want to add one thing to what was said. Is actually, people not looking for pedestrians was only part of it. Actually, what I observe all the time is that people roll right through the intersection without stopping the right on red. So basically, they're illegal right on red, whether or not, I mean, which is also going to affect car-on-car collisions, which I believe they've had a fair number of at that intersection. So, but yes, I think, Dwayne, it sounds like a really great idea to put the camera in there. I'm looking forward to hearing what results that you get out of that.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, we
This is
are,
Daniel.
Oh.
Sorry, this is Daniel Johnson. Just want to clarify for Alan that Dwayne said the town is considering the use of a camera. You know, he didn't commit to using a camera at this time, but they're looking into that. Just want to clarify that for the record.
Dwayne Martin, town engineer again. No, we're committing. We're going to put the camera out there to review it. It's just a matter of getting it out there and then bringing it back and evaluating and reporting on our findings. So we will do that.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
all right, thank you. Now, we are moving on to item B, which is proposed new bike route. And I'm very pleased that Claire O'Donnell, who is a 10-year-old, who's been biking a lot because of the virus and everybody being at home. And she came up, and this is in the packet that was sent out and was posted online. She's suggesting a new route that we might add to the 3 routes that already exist in town. And I'm really pleased that Scott Franklin is on the meeting call also, because Scott can sort of fill us in as we discuss this as to what the thinking was in developing the first 3 routes. So Claire, are you out there? Can you unmute your phone and tell us a little bit about the route?
So my dad and I have been biking a lot, and we thought it'd be cool to put one like through Elizabeth Park and around by there, by Morley and stuff.
Yeah, does most everybody have the sketch that was sent out? The route goes along Asylum Avenue, goes into Elizabeth Park, around the park, comes back out on, I think it's Steel, then across Bainbridge, down Quaker Lane to Milton, and then back north. I apologize because I didn't look up all these route names. Can you fill us in on some of these roads, Claire?
Robin Road, Ballard.
It's
Ballard.
Robin Road to Ballard.
Thank you. And I bicycle on those roads a lot, so I should have recognized that.
I think Colin Gillespie, just saying I bike that every weekend with my family, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Claire. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
And
You know,
Sandy,
when-
this is Scott. The paths that were, or the routes that were designed initially were really more further west in town. And so this really was an area that didn't get a bike route, which was perfect for a bike route. It's flat. There's not a lot of traffic, and it's closer to the Hartford line, which is great. I think it's a really nice plan.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jill Morosky. I think it's a great part of town to have it in. I was wondering, Claire, what you think about going down Asylum Avenue. I'm a seasoned cyclist, and I really avoid that part of Asylum because it's got boulevards and it's very narrow. Do you feel comfortable on Asylum?
So there's a little like path to get into Elizabeth Park that I think I would change to get into by Steel, because the last little stretch to get into the main entrance is very narrow.
Okay, yes. So you would you would remove all of the Asylum Avenue part? And
No, just the portion from Steel to the entrance of the park.
oh,
So
okay.
Yeah, it would go from Ballard to Steel, and then at Steel, right at that corner, you can cut into the park, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Oops. Any other discussion on that? Anybody else have anything?
This is Colin Gillespie again. One of the things that would be interesting as part of this improvement is to make that more of a true entrance to the park, because right now it's one of the only spots that doesn't have an arch or anything else to say it's Elizabeth Park. So that spot, if we're talking about the entrance I'm thinking about, could also be more designated as a true bicycle and pedestrian entrance.
This is Ken Livingston. This may be unfortunately a question for Dwayne, but given Elizabeth Park is actually owned by the city of Hartford, do we need to do coordination, or is there a standard agreement with the city, and maybe we need to talk to their pedestrian and coordinator at the city and see what they have to say.
Dwayne Martin, town engineer. Yeah, there would have to be some coordination with the city, but I wouldn't think that would be insurmountable. We did look at possibly having a connection like this when we were repaving Asylum Ave. That came into the conversation. We even talked about maybe having a side path off of Asylum Ave along the park. There may be an opportunity to do that. But yeah, technically we'd have to coordinate with the city for connections like that. But I don't know how much of a challenge that would be. I don't think it would be that big of a deal.
What I can do is follow up.
There's a dirt path from the entrance off of Asylum up to Prospect. I go there when we have our Cycling Without Age. I usually go along that little dirt path, as long as it's not too muddy.
I know somebody just recently complimented the work that was done. Has anybody seen the new entrance off of Fern Street? I don't, it sounded to me like it was done, because I heard somebody talk about that being nice. I'll check with the city park superintendent to find out if there's any intention at the corner with Steel to make any improvement there, because that would be the city who would do that. And then, you know, marking a route through the park would need the city to say that was okay, that they would participate in that. Was somebody else trying to speak there?
No, but now I am. This is Jill Morosky again. Can you go through that park regularly? So cycling is permitted on all the paths and roads. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think, but I think it's directional on some of them. Are those roads all two-way if you're driving? Because if you're biking, you should be following I mean, the city's thinking about whether we want to make one-way park roads two-way for bike, but at this point, they're not.
It's
So
it's almost like a
It's
one
one
way.
way. They're both
Sorry.
one way. The loop.
Okay,
Uh,
well, why don't we give ourselves the assignment for everybody to go out and ride this route and make sure we're comfortable. And at our next meeting, then we would make a motion to actually forward this to the town. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Yes.
All right. Claire,
Right,
thank
thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
I think everybody shares my appreciation for a 10-year-old who likes to bike so much that you reached out to our group. So keep on biking.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fair.
All right, next item under new business is the Town Energy Task Force report. They asked us to give them feedback on their transportation page. And that page, it's a PowerPoint page that was included in the packet of information I sent out. Did anybody take a look at that? Colin was holding the page up if anybody saw that. Do we maybe want to push this off as a future discussion and everybody will take a look at this page before our next meeting?
This is Daniel Johnson. I would ask that.
Okay. All right, we can do that.
And actually, it might be a good one that we look at. Sorry, Colin Gillespie here. It might be a good one to look at beforehand, but also explain a little bit present it, as it were.
Yeah, probably what I should do is send everybody the link to the full plan so you can see how it fits in.
That's fair.
All right, well, that's the end of new business. Then we have reports. I don't think we have, unless Gina has a report for us or Dwayne has anything he hasn't already shared, but I don't think we have anybody else from town staff who might want to share anything. Is there anyone?
This is Daniel Johnson. I just have a question for Dwayne Martin. If he's still on the line. I don't know if he might have dropped off.
Yep, I'm on. Sorry.
Oh, hey, Dwayne. So kind of jumping back up to the Fern Street parking, you mentioned, and I think this is a part that I don't get enough information about on the pedestrian side. So can you just explain, you're making some nice crosswalk improvements, so what those are and how that's going to impact school children or anybody walking to school. And there's a discussion that Sandy mentioned regarding bike and lane signage. Do you have a number of how many signs will be installed in maybe that 1 block radius? So those two items, I think, for me, crosswalk improvements are really important. Definitely as I walk around with a 9-month-old son, so I'm really keen on crosswalks at this point in life. So I think some of those things are great for the commission to understand and maybe be brought into a little bit more as well, just so we can, understand the process for these crosswalk improvements. So if you wouldn't mind just commenting, I know that was a much earlier thing, but I couldn't get my phone on mute fast enough and type at the same time. So if you wouldn't mind jumping back up the page.
Sure, my pleasure. Dwayne Martin, town engineer again. So actually the crosswalk that goes across Fern Street between Cumberland and Breton was where the conversation with the school kind of started several years ago. they were getting complaints from parents regarding the safety of for themselves and their kids as they're trying to go to and from the school. As I mentioned before, there's a good number of parents that park on Cumberland, but just parents that live in the neighborhood that are walking their kids to school or maybe after school going to the playground or an event. So that's where it really started. We had a flashing beacon there. I don't know if everybody remembers that, but it really wasn't all that effective at bringing awareness to the crosswalk. And we did a lot of signage improvements and modifications to the intersection to try and increase awareness. There was also residents that lived nearby that were complaining about speeds. You're driving down the hill from Quaker, heading towards the school. Oftentimes people are coasting, and then you throw in all the parking that we talked about earlier, and just the frenzy that occurs during that time. So we discussed a lot of ideas, and when we decided that, through the effort of the PVC and the bicycle facility plan and Complete Streets to do the bike lanes here, there was a combined effort, not only to accommodate the cyclists as best we can, trying to slow cars down, and then knowing about the concerns that were raised with the crosswalk. The town has been replacing crosswalks near schools with an enhanced treatment of stamped asphalt. And so that's what's proposed for the crosswalk. I actually just met with a contractor today out there to go over the project. And so on the new asphalt, instead of just putting paint down on that primary crosswalk across Fern Street, it's going to be stamped. And you may have seen these around town. We have a number of them now where it's like a maroon color material that goes down on the pavement, and then that's intermittent with white to mimic a painted crosswalk. So you have the black pavement, then you have the reddish, it's like a maroon color background, and then the white. The white really stands out because of the new pavement and the red around it to enhance the crosswalk. There's new signs that are there now for the pedestrian crossing, but we thought this would be a great application for what's referred to as a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or RRFB for short. And so I believe the application that we're going to look to install there is a solar powered. Will communicate wirelessly between the two. So somebody will push a button and it'll cause the sign to flash a yellow rapid flashing LED light. And the two opposite sides of the street will work in conjunction with each other, just to increase the awareness for the motorists that a pedestrian is going to be crossing. We did get a lot of complaints from parents, as I mentioned. There is a crossing guard that's posted there, but there's a lot of crossing activity that occurs when the crossing guard is not there. And so this will be an enhancement for all times of day to help with that pedestrian crossing there. So I think that pretty much answers the question.
Yep, and you mentioned, you and Sandy talked about bike and lane signage in front of the school. Do you have a number of how many of those signs and locations?
Well, we did share a plan. So Sandy, you could send that around again if everybody didn't get it. And so it was all of Fern Street from Trout Brook all the way up to Prospect. I happen to have it on my screen now. And so in the eastbound direction, like I said, we have the bike and lane sign, and eventually that'll get replaced. That one's at Ardmore. There's also a Sharrow at that spot because you're dropping out of the bike lane into the shared lane. And then we would have another sign at Breton. That's in the eastbound direction for the bike lane beginning again. And I know there was some concern about the message for when the bike lane transitions. So we'll have to discuss that further. In the opposite direction, there's new signs that are going to be installed on Fern opposite the school that say no parking bike lane. They typically don't like to do that because you could put them everywhere, but that's a concentrated area where people would park for the school. So we felt as though it was appropriate from the get-go to put those in. As you know, in some cases we don't put them in and then we need to put them in, like Boulevard from Trout Brook heading up the hill. We had a lot of people that were parking in the bike lane, so we ended up adding signs there, and we will do that as needed. But usually I try and avoid that from the get-go just to benefit the neighborhood and have less signs. So there's a couple in that block in both directions. And like I said, we share the plan. We get your comments, we revise it accordingly, and then if we need to, we can add signage or change signage if there are any issues that come up.
Okay, thank you. Answered my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dwayne. Okay, next item on the,
I have a quick question for Dwayne. This is Jill Morosky. Dwayne, this is a pedestrian and sidewalk question. Are property owners responsible to keep the sidewalks clear from brush and low-hanging branches, or does the town do that?
It all depends on who the abutting property owner is. Whoever they are, they're supposed to do it. Generally speaking, sometimes there's arrangements between the state and the town, but in most cases, it's the abutting property owner. So
Okay.
if there is some landscaping, bushes, tree branches, what have you, that hangs low, even though it's in the right of way, it's the responsibility of the abutting property owner, provided that the vegetation originates from private property. So if it's a tree in the grass strip in the right of way, that's the town's responsibility. If the tree's behind the sidewalk and it has a low hanging branch, or there's bushes that are encroaching on the sidewalk, that's the private property owner that lives there. That's actually, I believe, the health district, believe it or not, that enforces that ordinance.
So if people have concerns, they contact the health department?
Yes, but we get those complaints too because people don't know who to communicate the complaint to. So we always could forward them, but I believe they have the authority, and usually a letter gets sent out to that property owner to tell them they need to address it.
Okay, thank you.
But this girl has had her license for long enough to drive in New York, so.
sorry, couldn't get myself unmuted there. Okay, next item on the agenda is update from Bike West Hartford, Inc. Ethan, Ed, anybody want to give us an update?
I don't know if they're on, Sandy, but I can give you an update.
Yeah, Ethan's here too.
Oh, Ethan, do you want to give an update on Center Street?
I can, okay, I'll be glad to. So this is Ethan Frankel, Bike West Hartford. Before that, I just want to quickly mention how much pleasure I get from seeing so many bicyclists on the road, since it's just a small positive that we can find a positive in this whole COVID thing, but there are many, many more bicycles on the road than we've seen in the past, in any time I can remember in West Hartford. So I think that our role is even more important than it ever has been. Regarding Center Streets, we've and anybody can jump in, Ed or Scott, we've refrained from making a decision, or certainly we have refrained from canceling Center Streets, with the hopes that by the end of August, there'll be enough opening of behavior, that will allow us to go ahead with Center Streets. Now, that being said, we have no money. We've not raised a penny because we didn't want to commit. And we're still kind of going on the notion that we'll figure it out, and we're hoping maybe the town will help us in some way, because this is extraordinary circumstances, and this will be the 5th Center Streets. And it could really represent kind of a joyous morning for people who have not been able to go to anything, Celebrate West Hartford, none of the traditional events that happen. And so we're just hoping somehow we'll pull it together, whatever we have to do to have Center Streets happen. As far as I drove through town and I saw the changes being made in the center. I don't think that they would preclude us from using the same route we've been using, because I think that it's still, there's still plenty of room there. So that's a positive. And what's going on with downtown, I think, is really showing what could be done with downtown in the future when this is over. Because I think there is room for bicycle. It'll show that there's room for bicycle paths and less car lanes than there have been. But that's the situation with Center Street. If anybody else wants to add, please do.
Ethan, let me just mention that the tentative date is still held by the town. It's Sunday, August 30th, right, from 9 to 1?
Yes, I believe so.
So it's something that if we don't have a lot of booths to worry about, and it's really just riding the bike route, and maybe getting some musicians out around that we could put together quickly. The question is raising the money. If we need to raise the money to set the roads down.
Hey, Shell, can you hold on just 1 sec?
Okay, thank you, Bike West Hartford, Inc. Next is update from Cycling Without Age. Do you have anything for us, Dan?
Needless to say, because of the coronavirus, we have not done much at all this year thus far. However, on May 17th, the rickshaw was taken out to Bolton and was part of a filmmaking program to publicize Bike Walk Bolton and the Hop River Trail in Bolton.
Well, that's a good use if we couldn't give anybody a ride.
Well,
Sandy,
unfortunately, we can't. So,
Okay, who was that who was adding something?
Yeah, this was Scott. I just had one more thing to add regarding Bike West Hartford. And that was that I had been approached by Helen Rubino Turco. The Department of Leisure Services, Social Services is putting together a program for the summer, part of which will be pedestrian oriented and part of it will be bicycle oriented. And they've asked the Bike West Hartford if we would perhaps every Friday or every Saturday morning or something like that for a good portion of the summer, lead a bicycle ride. And I told her that we would be happy to participate. So we'll let you know a little bit more about that as it unfolds.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. I know you do such an excellent job with those two, so that I'm sure that's going to be wonderful. And that will that be a weekly event?
That's my understanding. She's still putting it together, but she asked me specifically, if we did like a Friday after work or a Saturday morning every week for the rest of the summer, would you be willing to do it? And we said we'd figure out a way to make it happen.
That's great. And maybe at the start of the rides, we can indoctrinate a little safety information too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Okay, good. Thank you. Is there anybody, we're really at the end of our agenda. Is there anybody on the commission or anybody who's called in who would like to address us? And if you do, just give your name first.
There's no way. Those eggs are all red. There's no way.
All right. Hearing none. Although if anybody's slow on the trigger with their mute, unmute button, it'll take us a little bit to get to adjournment. But our next meeting will be July 13th, 7 p.m. I'm assuming it will be the same kind of setup. So I hope you can join us then. And if there's
the back of your leg?
If there's no other business, if there's no one who wishes to address us, we will adjourn.
Thank you.